speaker this morning, Rachel Norris. We met Rachel, was it over a year ago, last summer? And Rachel was brilliant. She would regularly sort of send me emails of encouragement. This is before they would officially part of the church. And her husband Pete is one of our curates, one of the vicars here. Rachel would send me encouraging emails, just encouraging me with my talks or just generally. So she's just full of encouragement, full of life. And I know this morning that she's going to encourage us as well. So would you please welcome Rachel Norris as she comes to speak?
Thank you. What an introduction. Thank you. I'm really excited to be with you this morning, to be sharing this with you, because what God was doing in the room just a minute ago is exactly what he has put on my heart to share with you this morning. So that's ace. So let's dig into our passage. This morning, our reading is from Isaiah 43, verses 1 to 3, and it should come up on the screen, but I'll read it for you now. But now, this is what the Lord says, he who created you, Jacob, he who formed you, Israel, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name, you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Saviour. This is the word of the Lord. So let me talk to you about the sea. We've all seen it, right? I think it's probably that way. I can say that I have experienced the sweep of the sea that this passage is talking about today. So picture this. It's a classic British seaside day. I'm probably about 5 or 6, merrily digging in the sand, a huge mop of hair, not too dissimilar to now. And I suddenly see out of the corner of my eye my dad at breakneck speed whipping the windbreak out of the sand, like scooping up the lunch boxes, folding down the chairs, and there's all this yelping and kind of commotion happening around me. And before I know it, my mum's scooped me up and is running me to the back of the beach. This huge swell of water had come in, and suddenly the beach was submerged in basically the tide. And I remember standing at the back of this beach and legs aching because it felt like an absolute mountain climb for someone so small. And all I could see floating out to sea was my pink bucket. And in all of my dad's heroics, he'd managed to get everything back to the back of the beach, but my pink bucket didn't manage to make it. And here begins for me a fear of the sea, or rather a fear of the unpredictability of the sea. And to that end, as a grown woman, Pete and I used to enjoy camping before we had the girls, and we would often go and camp down at Watergate Bay. We had a really good rhythm. Pete would set up the beach tent for me. I'd scoop him into his wetsuit. He'd go off on the bodyboard out into the sea, and I'd just sit and read and chill for a little bit. And he would be gone for hours, and I'd have a great time. Except one day, same thing happens again. Who knew it? The sea, it's tidal. It sweeped into the beach, and I suddenly just froze, and I was stood by the beach tent like a hot mess. And Pete came back and was like, what's happened? What's going on? I was like, the sea is coming in. I don't know what to do. And I was just absolutely panicked and frozen. So those of you now who know that I do enjoy a swim in the sea will know actually that is quite a triumph for me in life. But I'm pretty sure that the text today isn't actually speaking about literal waters. It's an image for us, an image of something that is overwhelming, that overwhelms our very being. So, how do you find yourself today? Have you had an easy morning, featuring coffee in bed maybe, a long shower, perhaps you've meandered down here? Or maybe you found yourself shouting up the stairs for someone to get their shoes on, while someone else was spilling Cocoa Pops on the table and trying to find the wet wipes all before 9 a.m. Sound familiar? That was my morning. But every person in this space this morning carries with them a story. You all carry a book or a book worth of moments. And some of those that you've lived through or that you are living through feel like overwhelming waters, almost about to submerge that pink bucket of yours, or it feels like you're in a hot blazing fire and that smoke from that fire is so confusing that you can't see the wood from the trees. And this is exactly what the people of Israel are experiencing here in this passage. They've been cast out into exile. And so geographically, they're nowhere near their home. They're nowhere near the land that God had promised them, that they are searching for, that they're yearning for. And spiritually, they're completely in exile. Because in that time, they used to use temples to worship God. And that would be the way that they would connect with him and talk with him before now we have Jesus and we kind of have that hotline to be able to talk with God. And so they had nowhere to build this temple, so they had nowhere of connecting with their God, with our God. And also, they were in exile emotionally because, in the words of Green Day, they were walking down a boulevard of broken dreams. And that refrain of, I walk alone, was ringing in their ears because their dreams of a home, their dreams of freedom that they dared to believe still weren't coming true. And the people of Israel at this point are awaiting God's intervention. They need him to change their situation. They need him to bring them back, to bring them home. Now, many of you today will know that place of exile. You may feel like you are in it right now. Could be exile from your jobs, from your social circle, from the mum club, from the WhatsApp group at work. It could be from your parents. It might even be from the church. Or actually, you might feel like you're in exile from God. That he is so unreachable, that he is so untouchable, that he's so unknowable. And you're wondering if all of this is really true. I get that. I've been there. And I'm not going to stand here this morning and tell you actually that I have all the answers for you, shame. But I can flesh out for you what it means or what it looks like to pass through rivers and to not be submerged forever. So in this passage, it could not be clearer the word when. We see the word when you pass through waters, when you walk through fire. It doesn't say if bad things happen. It's giving us that certainty that stuff will hit the fan. And that is a pretty certain thing in life. Now, for you right now, life might be peachy, in which case, great. Let's celebrate that and praise God and stand with you in that. But just in case all is not well, here's a very quick tour of how this part of the text where God goes on to say, I will be with you, I know in my life to be true. Now, this week, I've really wrestled with how to do this in a way that isn't trite or self-serving or gives you a two-dimensional view of that very real reality that God is with us when we go through fire. So much so that I've actually completely rewritten this talk last night because what I did have, I don't think God wanted me to say. So, yeah, trusting that this is what he wants me to say. The people of Israel, they're here on this boulevard of broken dreams, broken promises that God has promised them that they will be a gathered and united people, that they have a future, that they have a hope, that they will have a place to call their own. Ultimately, that they will have identity. And they're left questioning if it's all a lie. They're left asking that question, were we dumb for believing God's promise? Is God really with us? Maybe you're asking yourself that question today, or you can think of a time in your life when you have asked that question. And so I know a bit about what it is to have broken dreams. Lots of you will have experienced broken dreams. And so I'm going to give you a little window into one. From probably about the age of 8, for a variety of reasons, which I won't bore you with, I felt like God was leading me towards working with street children in Central America. And it completely shaped my understanding and my experience of who God was. It shaped my outlook and my life choices, and I was clearly so passionate about it. I remember being in year 6, and we were looking at the world map, and I was sat next to this boy, and I pointed at the map, and I said, I'm going to go there. That's what I'm going to do. And when I said to him the country I was going to, he struggled to pronounce it, and he was like, oh, why would you want to go to tomato country? And I really vividly remember being so passionate and so kind of set on that was the direction of my life that I didn't really care about people's reactions to it. I sponsored a child from that country. I chose my GCSE and my A-levels based on the kind of skills and the knowledge that it would give me. Everything in my life was heading to that point. And despite lots of different obstacles in my way, and we had a particularly turbulent year as a family, I managed to get there. I made it out to this place, age 18. I'd said, see you soon to Pete and see you soon to my parents. And I had the full intention of being out there for 9 months to work with a project. But in short, that dream didn't last longer than 2 weeks. It was snatched from me in lots of ways, and I ended up returning to the UK spiritually and kind of emotionally in tatters. And I only really had the pieces of this kind of 10-year-long dream that I was trying to kind of wade through, and it felt a bit like wading through golden syrup. And I honestly would say to you, if someone had dared to breathe to me in that time, oh, God was with you, I would have punched them in the face. I really would. Because if you're right in the eye of a storm, in that moment, I'm not here to say that to you at all. It's not helpful. But what I can say, and something that I found from that season, is that it is a darn sight easier to do it with God rather than to try and get out of that storm without him. And my memory in the aftermath of that time is really hazy and it's quite scattered, and perhaps that is a kindness. But one thing that really stands out to me is connected to a song. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing it for you. I will save that for the spectacular. Book your tickets. It was a refrain in the song, and you might know it. It's, "And if our God is for us, who can be against us?" And I remember actively not singing that song for a long time, to the point that I would sit down in worship, because I could not see the truth of that phrase, "And if God is for us, who can be against us?" And there was one moment when Pete and I looked at each other across the church at that particular time, and kind of through gritted teeth and tears, we chose to say to each other and to God that we would rather walk this storm and rather come out of the other side with God than without him. And we chose to choose to trust in that time that as we passed through the waters, where actually I did feel burned and I did feel really charred from the fire of that time, that God was beside me, that he was before me, and that he was behind me. But you'll notice in this situation that God didn't airlift me out of those circumstances. He didn't swipe me out of it and change it kind of drastically, as much as I really would have liked him to. So what did it look like to actually walk through fire? And what did it look like to not be burned? Because I did feel burnt by it. And in the words of Swiftie in White Horse, she says, "I was a dreamer before you went and let me down." And that absolutely is what I said over and over to God. God, you let me down. And you might be saying that of the fires that you're in as well. Well, what it looks like is it comes down to presents. Presents with a C, not a T, although I do love presents, and Christmas is coming, folks. So, thinking of presents, does someone in your life spring to mind who always pops up at the wrong moment? Maybe you're in the middle of Lidl and you're about to lose it, and that mum from school walks around the corner and you've got to be like, "Oh, hi, yeah, great to see you." Or perhaps you're, I don't know, in the doctor's waiting room and the guy from work turns up and he's brazen enough to ask you why you're there. Perhaps it's that. Or maybe when you're trying to go to the toilet and your children want to sit on your lap or be right with you in that moment. Basically, an unwanted presence in your life. Now, I'll let you into no secret. What you, as in you and me and us, wear at home or don't wear at home is not necessarily what we would wear outside of the house. So picture this scene. Pete and I, when we were first married, we lived in Exeter in a tiny one-bed flat. Pete's at home, chilling, let's just say with minimal clothing on. And he hears the door buzz, and thinking it's me coming home, he lets the buzzer go. Little did he know, it was someone from church coming to meet me to go out for a drink, and I hadn't told Pete that I was going to meet her first at home. And so he buzzes her in, up she comes the stairs, and she goes to let herself in, and I kid you not, our living room kind of kitchen space was probably no bigger than this. So he didn't have a lot of time. And cue a mad rush for Pete to try and get some more clothes on before she came round the corner into our kitchen kind of come lounge. And for those of you worried, he did manage. He managed to find a pair of trousers. It's all okay. But what happened was her presence interrupted normal service. Her presence altered the outcome of Pete's time at home. It shifted the focus of that time. Now, God's presence in our lives is way more effective than our friend at altering our outlook and interrupting normal service. And it is the promise of his presence that has the power to not allow our circumstances to overwhelm and destroy us. I'm going to say that one again for you. That it is the promise of his presence that has the power to not allow our circumstances to overwhelm or destroy us. But what does his presence look like? Well, I would say comfort and courage. Now, it's not limited to this, but this is what I think his presence looks like when we're in deep waters and we're in the middle of that fire. Comfort, we all know that feeling of our favourite dressing gown or a hot bath or the first sip of a coffee in the morning, or Dave in our group has his favourite spot on our sofa at our house. God's comfort goes infinitely beyond that feeling. His comfort renews us and it strengthens us. Now, looking back over that particular season in my life, I can see where God was with me and how he was with me, comforting me. But at the time, I couldn't see that. I couldn't see that right in the eye of it. But now I can see him in the kindness of those who took care of me. I can see him in the hug and the tears that were shed by a friend. I can see him in the steadfastness of Pete. And I can see him holding my hands at different points, awake with me in the night, sat beside me on the sofa as I binged the whole series of One Tree Hill. He was totally present alongside me. But God's comfort in his presence has an end goal. It has a purpose. His presence has a purpose in our life, or at least it did for me in this time. His comfort nested me, yep. It rebuilt me, yep. But it showed me that life was out there. And it showed me that there was a life to be grabbed and to be fought for and to be sought after. And his presence then gave me the courage to do what used to be seemingly really small tasks. I remember I grew up in Columpton, which is just north of Exeter, and it's a small market town. And the walk from our house down into the centre of town was a walk I did hundreds of times. But when I first flew home, I think for the first afternoon I was on my own at home. I wanted to pop down into town to get a card. And I remember needing God's presence to give me the courage to do that walk. And step by step, I can now see how he was with me and how his presence gave me the courage to rebuild a life and actually to dare to dream for that hope and that future. So his presence looks like comfort and courage. But all of this really is possible because of the miracle, the absolute miracle of who Jesus is. Now, we're about to enter that season of Christmas and thinking about Jesus' physical presence on this earth. And his birth as a baby really matters, because it means that he, as God, feels what it is like to walk through fire, to feel burnt, and to survive anyhow. And the cross is the most beautiful example of that. Rob Bell, in his book, Drops Like Stars, which is the most beautiful book, and it's kind of like a graphic journey on the connection between sculpting and art and suffering, says this about the cross. Is the cross God's way of saying, I know how you feel? And this is why in this passage that we've looked at today, God can say to his people, and by extension us, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. He knew that Jesus, in paying that price for all of the waters and all of the fires that we find ourselves in, would make a way and would rebuild and would restore those broken dreams. And in John's Gospel, we see Jesus saying in this world that you will have trouble, but to take heart because I have overcome the world. And he also says again at the end of Matthew's Gospel, I think Matthew 28, he says, I am with you even until the end of the age. Now, God doesn't promise us any privilege. He doesn't promise us privilege as followers of Jesus. He doesn't promise us that we will be separate from reality, that we'll never have to endure hard things. But he does promise us his presence. And John Oswalt puts it actually much better than I can say it. He says, God does not say that there are no floods or forest fires, but he does promise that one can survive them because of his presence. What you find yourself in, you can survive. God has made a way for you to be able to do hard things with him. That's the key part. Acknowledging where we need his presence and those all-encompassing arms to be around us, guiding us as we go. And just like Matt was praying earlier, nothing with God is ever wasted. Nothing's ever too small. God is able to reuse and reshape and recast all that goes wrong. And in the end, nothing is left without significance. Nothing ceases to be precious to him. And his presence is gifted to you. It's gifted because in verse 4 after this passage, it goes on to say, I'm with you since you are precious, you are honored, and because I love you. You. He loves you. His promise and his presence of that promise of his presence is for you, and it is a gift. You know, I had a quick Google. I love a gift. So I had a quick Google on the most hotly anticipated sellout gift for the season ahead. I was surprised. Several sources, Good Housekeeping, Glamour Mag, Rolling Stones Mag, all the, reliable ones, say that it's going to be, wait for it, a candle warmer lamp. A candle warmer lamp, a lamp which glows like a candle without the special effect or the safety risks of a candle. So you basically don't get the scent or the heat from it. I mean, it's an idea, maybe. I mean, I'd take a candle warmer lamp. There you go, you've got an idea for Christmas. But I'd definitely choose God's presence over the potential top hotly anticipated gift of the year. Because God's presence has the absolute power to alter my outlook on my circumstances, to feel loved, to feel held, and to not feel alone. And actually, we can stop singing that refrain in the Boulevard of Broken Dreams, I walk alone, because that's not actually how it is. Jesus, one of Jesus' name is Emmanuel. It means actually God with us. And so you might find yourself today sat here and things are peachy and you might not be in a tough situation. And that's great because you can stand alongside those who aren't. But you might also be in the eye of a storm or coming out of one. And however you are finding yourself this morning, we would love now to make room for us to experience some of that presence, to experience some of God's comfort for you, and to experience the way that he can give you courage and that he can build you up for a hope and for a future. And so I'm going to invite Matt back to lead us in that.